Within hours of Donald Trump's executive order preventing refugees and immigrants from 7 predominantly Muslim countries from entering the U.S., about 150 Canadian tech industry leaders issued an open letter opposing the policy. They called on the U.S. to reverse course and for Canada to open its arms. The letter has now been signed by thousands, and tonight we welcome some of the signatories to find out more about why they signed. So here are Michael Serbinis. He is CEO and founder of League. That's a digital health insurance company. He's also the founder of the e-reader Kobo. Huda Idrees, founder and CEO of .health, a personal health information platform. Nicole Verkindt, founder of OMX, or Offset Market Exchange, a digital procurement platform for industry. She's also the newest dragon on CBC's Next Gen Den. And Allen Lau, co-founder and CEO of Wattpad, a global entertainment storytelling platform, and we are happy to welcome you all to TVO tonight for this important conversation, which, Nicole, I'm going to ask you to start off on. How would you characterize the reaction in your industry to the travel ban imposed by Donald Trump?
Look, this ban happened very quickly. It was implemented really, really quickly, and everyone, I think, was surprised by it. I mean, we heard the rhetoric during the election, and we kind of saw something coming, but it happened so fast. For me, I think I went to sleep. I made a joke. I went to sleep early on a Saturday night, and I woke up in the morning, and it was just instinctive. I think, there's kind of this debate between whether or not all the signatories, if it was a moral decision or a business. For me, it came down to values, and it was just an instinctive, this doesn't feel like what we stand for.
So it just felt, the whole thing felt wrong to you?
Yeah, and I think everyone's reaction, I think it was just, it started as a gut reaction.
Michael, how about you?
Listen, we've all had history classes at school, and we've learned about those times in history where there were moments that bad stuff happened, and it seemed like nobody stood up. This seemed like one of those moments where people needed to stand up and really just do the right thing.
Huda?
Canada seems to, be this beacon of light and hope for what the rest of the world is not standing up for, and I think that letter was a little bit of a proof of exactly that, of people coming together in a very short amount of time against something very large and, not as unprecedented as we might think.
Why did you sign?
Well, it just wasn't right. So we have to stand up for what we always believe in. Diversity has always been our strength, and inclusion has always been our value. And that's why we have to stand up for this. And this is not that difference. In fact, I would say it's an extension of what we have always been advocating for.
Let's just do a little excerpt of the letter here, shall we, and bring everybody else in on that? Go ahead, Sheldon, let's put this up. Canadian tech companies understand the power of inclusion and diversity of thought, and that talent and skill know no borders. In choosing to hire, train, and mentor the best people in the world, we can build global companies that grow our economy. By embracing diversity, we can drive innovation to benefit the world. Okay, Michael, let me get you on this first. Is there a relationship between innovation and diversity in your sector?
Absolutely. My very first tech experience, my template for doing what I've done for the last 20 years was in an old restaurant in Palo Alto with a couple South African guys, Elon and Kimball Musk, a Russian guy named Darko, a guy named Greg from the Middle East, and me, son of Greek immigrants to Canada.
I think I know those first two names.
Yeah.
What was it? Musk?
Musk, yeah. You might have
hung
heard
out with them?
Yeah.
Back in the day.
So there's a great example of we all grew up in a very different environment and brought very different perspectives. And that fueled the creativity that led to creating, a global company.
Huda, do you see that connection between innovation and diversity in your sector?
Definitely. I think innovation ends up becoming a little bit of something that needs to happen, but you can't predict it. And so you try to take the largest amount of people that you can, the largest sample size that you can, and the moment you become homogenous, that's when you reduce your chances of being that innovator, being that pioneer in industries like healthcare, like transportation, just large, broad, sweeping changes.
Well, Allen, you went even further than that. You wrote somewhere that Toronto's diversity gives you an quote-unquote unfair advantage. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, we have 45 million monthly users around the world. US is our #1 country, but we have a lot of users in Philippines, in Turkey, in Italy, France, Mexico. And in Toronto, as you know, half the population
Born outside Canada.
Born outside Canada, right? So in my company, I would say my employees, they are a reflection of the broader community. You know, half the staff, they were born outside of Canada or bilingual or multilingual. And that gives us the cultural and language diversity so that we understand the cultural nuances in different countries. And we also understand, for example, even from the product design perspective, we know that offline access, slow internet, low capability phones, low end phones, is something that we have to work on. Without that knowledge, we wouldn't be able to do what we do.
Let me just better understand that from across the sector. Tell me about your business. What does OMX do?
We're a supply chain management platform, so we work with big contractors and push out procurement opportunities to companies across Canada and now the world. But we really focus in on, say, large oil and gas or energy projects where they have an obligation or a desire to source locally from, say, Aboriginal-owned businesses or small businesses or startups, that sort of thing. So we really focus on capturing the data on what that diversity is in the supply chain.
And how does what we've been talking about here help your business? The notion that diversity and innovation go hand in hand, and as Allen suggests, it may even be like an unfair advantage, quote unquote, for us.
Yeah, look, when you're starting a startup, and Michael and I were reminiscing about his early days, and he's knocking on pizza company doors, and it reminded me so much of when we got started. And I think when you're hiring and you're building your team, it really is a true meritocracy. I mean, you're really just going to whoever you think can get that job done, and whoever's willing to knock on those doors, and whoever's willing to do that sort of thing. So it's not really about this large corporation internal politics, and I think that's something that's very unique. And then you look at what we're building. I mean, Allen's connecting to 45 million people around the world. There's no borders on that. It's all online. It's through an app. And for us, it's the same thing. I mean, we're exporting our technology to India right now. We have people in India using our technology for their local sourcing that was built here in Toronto, and we're communicating with them in the middle of the night a lot of the times. But I mean, that is real diversity, and that's kind of like a whole new world that's happening online. And so I just don't think tech entrepreneurs we don't really see borders, and we don't judge by that. I mean, there's no borders there in that sense.
Let's follow up on League. What does League do?
Yeah, so League is really turning the the health insurance industry on its head. The existing model is one that is really about the institution first versus the consumer first. It's one size fits all versus personalized, and it's really about fix you when you're sick versus preventative. So we're building a next-gen health insurance company that's consumer first and digital.
What do you think of Obamacare? No, never mind. That's another show. Tell me about this, though. The notion of innovation and diversity being some kind of super advantage for you guys. How does that work?
So I think it absolutely gives us edge. I saw it in my previous company, Kobo, where we exported our experience to 190 plus countries around the world. And I see it now with League, where this future of healthcare is about the consumer first. We've got consumers across the country, and it's growing every day, that speak hundreds of languages and come from dozens of cultures and of course hundreds of countries around the world. Understanding that consumer to deliver an experience around their personalized healthcare, it's critical to have some of those people inside our organization. And as we think about exporting to not only the US, but countries across Europe and Asia, it's vital.
Okay, let me just check in on everybody's backgrounds here. You two both born in Canada? Yes.
I was born in Canada.
You two both not born in Canada,
Yep.
yes? Where are you from?
I was born in Saudi Arabia, but my background is my parents are both from Pakistan, and their families moved after Muslims were persecuted in India for the partition.
So you are a classic Canadian story in some respects. A little bit of everything from all over the place.
Yeah.
And Alan, how about you?
Born and raised in Hong Kong. I studied university here and stay here ever since. I've been living here for over 25 years.
Living here 25 years, and you?
I moved here when I was 17, 8.5 years.
8.5 years,
Yeah.
okay. Are you that young?
Yeah.
Good for you. You started your own business and you're off to the races.
Well, that's the whole point of diversity when you talk about economies like Canada's, is that this is not a barrier for me. Instead, it's an advantage.
I get it.
Yeah, it's cool.
Can you talk about that special sauce of innovation and diversity and how it worked together for your business?
Yeah. So, for example, we have a staff in the company who is fluent in Turkish, Portuguese, Spanish, Tagalog, you name it. It's like a united nation in my office, and because of that, we are able to, in a single location, but with everyone who can understand pretty much every country, every language in the world, work together and serve our users from around the world and around the clock as well. So I just don't see any other places that can easily assemble such an international team in a single location and serve so many people around the world.
Well, the inference our audience is probably taking from this, which I suspect you would like them to take, is that by America putting on this travel ban and or suspension, they are depriving themselves of some pretty talented people who might otherwise help their economy, improve their society, and so on. And to that end, Sheldon, shall we bring this up? Let's quote the Wall Street Journal here from earlier in the month. The biggest loss from excessive or capricious restrictions on immigration would ultimately be the loss of the community of best-in-the-world minds that coalesce in a tech hub like Silicon Valley. That culture can't be replaced or reproduced solely with native talent. Imagine, for example, if the U.S. had refused to use foreign scientific and engineering talent when building the first atomic bomb. That talent may not wait around for the U.S. immigration picture to become clearer. The world is now littered with startup ecosystems and tech hubs outside of the U.S. and Silicon Valley. So this does raise the question, Nicole, about whether or not the decision that the United States has made could potentially be a boon for Canadian businesses. What do you think?
Look, I think, Canada, our fertility rate's not meeting up with replacement rates. We need to bring immigrants into Canada, and we've seen that there's a positive outcome with that. We also have a huge requirement for hiring for ICT, tech people that are engineers and graduate from these programs like Waterloo, and a lot of them are going to the States. So I think we need to bring some of those people back or try to keep them here. And then, yes, I agree. If there's a brilliant kid with a great idea in Finland or somewhere in the Middle East or anywhere, and they choose Canada, and because they're lured here by the Canadian dream and everything that comes with that, that's a great thing.
Huda, do you think some people from outside of Canada could be put off by the American experience right now and end up coming here and helping us as opposed to them?
I think so. I think there's a lot of uncertainty when you travel to the U.S., even if you don't hold a passport from one of those 7 countries and you happen to be Muslim, and if you look Muslim, that's worse for you, and there's just no certainty that you'll be let in or you'll be treated in a way that you would think a country that touts freedom as the core of its building. And I think, sure, people might come to Canada, but this is not new. Canada has always stood for diversity. So I think it shines more of a light on us, but I wouldn't say that it's because of the US. We have always been here doing this diverse, innovative thing, and it just so happens that people are starting to notice because the competition is so much, is I think, messing up.
Can I ask you a bit of a personal question?
Sure.
Would you go to the States right now?
I would not. I've actually, we were planning on pursuing a business client down in New York, and we've held off on that.
Because?
Because of the uncertainty and the instability in the country right now. I would have to go as the CEO of my company, and I don't know that I would be let past the border.
So you would be concerned about actually getting to that border and being turned back?
Definitely.
Because of?
Because I look visibly Muslim. And even though I don't belong to those 7 countries that were banned,
Saudi Arabia is not on the list.
That's right, surprisingly so. I would still be concerned because there's a Canadian woman from Quebec who was turned away with a Canadian passport. I don't know that I would feel safer with a Saudi one.
Do you have any concerns about traveling to the United States right now?
Absolutely. Not for my staff at the moment, but I have just heard yesterday from another CEO. He has a data scientist, PhD in data science, born and raised in Syria. And these CEOs simply cannot send this data scientist to the U.S. anymore. And he has a big business in the U.S. and it's causing a huge problem for him. And I don't believe he's alone. It's just sooner or later it will impact me, and I'm sure impact the rest of us as well.
Can Canada, I mean, this is a bit of an odd way to put it, but can Canada, from an economic standpoint, Michael, take advantage of the fact that these problems seem to exist?
Absolutely. I think right now we've seen an unprecedented level of chaos in the administration south of the border, and that breeds uncertainty. And it's not just this current travel ban, it's NAFTA, it's an H-1B visa pullback, other specific, industry, like healthcare industry changes.
Let me just stop you for a sec. H-1B refers to what kind of a visa is that?
It's a visa that allows management or specialized talent under NAFTA to enter and work in the U.S.
Gotcha. Well, they even pulled the Nexus card off for a while, right? And they even were starting to have second thoughts about allowing people with Nexus cards to go through.
So if you think of all that uncertainty, from a business standpoint, where do you invest? Knowing, and especially as a startup where you're on the clock, right? It's a competitive sport. There's only a couple guys on the podium. No one remembers number 3. You've got a limited amount of time to make something happen, and you've just now entered a world where the ground is shaky. So can we capitalize on it? Should we capitalize on it? Absolutely.
Having said that, Nicole, I mean, it's still fair to say everybody still wants to make it big in the U.S., right? And therefore,
Of course.
I mean, this may be a bump in the road, but this is not going to change people's minds forever about where they truly want to make their money. Is that fair to say?
Well, here's the reality about being a Canadian company. It's the Shania Twain effect, right? You have to make it in New York before you make it here. And so we have fundamentally have to make it through exports as well as selling in our own country. Our market's pretty small, and we have to be good at exporting, and that's a big strength of ours. So I think the approach that we should take when we have these conversations is to show the positivity. I'm glad the letter said this is our strength as opposed to saying that's your weakness. I think we need to keep pushing that. I think at the end of the day, a lot of these things come down to culture. And it's culture within a startup, it's culture within a country, and it's culture within the country's approach to its startup community and innovation and technology. And then the other point is people always think about technology as just software, going to buy software. That's what everyone always thinks about, or hardware. But we really need to think about it as the key competitive advantage in all of our sectors. I mean, we sell to oil and gas, to aerospace, to defense. We need to think about it as an advantage in all of our exports. So I think that's important too. But you're right, we have to sell to the US. We have to sell all over the world. And I think Canada is well positioned to kind of be that bridge from the United States to Europe and to the rest of the world. So I think we have a real advantage here. It's exciting.
At the risk of all sounding a bit like we're holding hands and singing Kumbaya here, let's put some other numbers on the table, Sheldon, shall we? To look at the diversity within your industry. And here are some of the numbers. This, according to the Information and Communications Technology Council, ICT. In 2001, admittedly going far back, 28% of ICT's workers were born outside of Canada. In 2015, it was 37%. This according to StatsCan now. In 1987, 20% of the science, technology, engineering, and math, the so-called STEM workforce, was female. In 2014, all those years later, it's now a whopping 22%. Okay, those are the numbers, Huda. In your experience, does working in the Canadian tech industry live up to the values of diversity and inclusion that we've been talking about here tonight?
I think we have so much work to do.
Sounds like it.
So much work. I think it's coming together, but we shouldn't be patting ourselves on the back. 20%, 22% is a dream for most tech companies to have women working for them. Many are actually afraid of reporting on these numbers. Engineering classes, the amount of female students that come out and graduate out of STEM fields is actually higher than the amount that get placed in these roles. And I mean, there's an enormous amount of work to be done, not just bringing in females in entry-level positions, but in all levels of influence across the board. How many female CEOs do we have across large Canadian companies? The answer is a few, maybe 2 or 3 in the top 100. Yeah. And that's not enough, and I think that's indicative of why we're having such a problem bringing in new talent, is because that environment is not set up for them.
Although I heard Michael out of the corner of my ear say, we're at 50. You've got half the people in your firm that are
49%.
49% are women. How did that happen?
Listen, 20 years ago, that would not have happened. And I think it's a combination of the talent pool, and more women going into STEM, but also the industry, in my case, being tied to healthcare, which predominantly has more women than men across many different parts of or subsectors. And I think it's my recognition as a leader, right? in a burned out restaurant with a bunch of dudes eating pizza, coding all night. That's not the model. The model is a far more diverse workforce where creativity comes from people of not only all walks of life and races and religion, but male and female. My head of development is a rock star from MIT who then went to Mozilla and was a head of engineering there, and now she's running our development team. 20 years ago, that just didn't happen that much.
It didn't happen because why? 20 years ago, it wouldn't have happened because?
I think in part, people weren't putting their daughters or pushing their daughters in towards STEM, and in fact, math was not for girls, which I think is crazy. I have 3 daughters. We talk about inventing and math and science fairs all the time. When I was winning science fairs in the Nerd Olympics 20 years ago, and there just wasn't a lot of women. So I think as parents, attitudes have changed. I think the talent is absolutely there. In our case, our rock star head of development is a woman, and actually an American citizen who's here in Canada. And I think we now have more and more role models like her that are there for young daughters like mine to live up to.
Nicole, what's the male-female split in your company?
It would be about half as well.
Half and half?
Yeah, but on the STEM side, the engineers are all male. We're trying to hire more females. But you're right, the numbers are bad in STEM. I think that comes down to it's cultural. I really do. I think the culture in those programs tend to lean more towards male side still. But I think it's less than 3% of venture capital-backed startups are led by women. Mm-hmm. So women are also not stepping into these leadership roles. And so I think we need to see more mentorship. We need to see more encouragement. But what we are seeing that is being brought about because of tech there's a whole bunch of new job descriptions and roles that come out of tech. I mean, Alan, how many community managers do you have, right? That's a new title. That's not a blue chip standard title that exists only because of online tech platforms. These are new roles that don't have these traditional biases towards them. So there's kind of these unconscious biases that we all have. And so some of these tech platforms are bringing about these new roles. So I think we need to talk about it, not just STEM, that is a problem, but we also need to talk about it throughout the company. Like you said, 50% of all your employees, and also women leaders as well.
I should find out what that is. What's a community manager?
Community manager is someone who would interact with the users. They also manage the content, the interaction, and the relationship.
Is there enough, I want to get back to you on this though, do you think there's enough of a focus on creating diverse and inclusive workplaces in your sector?
I would say no. I think it's diversity is hot right now.
Diversity is hot?
Hot. It's like the hot thing to talk
Flavor of the
about.
month?
I'm a diverse company. Is a really nice soundbite to put in a newspaper next to your name. But I think a lot of the times we're paying lip service, where we're either going by a quota system, by we're saying, okay, you know what, I need to hire or interview at least 50% women, which is good, which is a start. But then we don't pay attention to the culture that we've managed to create at our company, and we end up burning out those women, and they leave the workforce entirely. Forget leaving your company, they leave the sector altogether. And I often pay attention to gender splits in companies as being, Nicole mentioned it being overall in the company, but if you often notice, all the marketing departments are women and all the engineering departments are men. And I think that's not good enough, because guess what? Engineers are the ones making the product that you're selling to a world that is made up of 50% women. Yeah. Turns out most of them are male. How do you think your product's going to react? And it's not even just the male-female thing, although that's the easiest one to get to because it's 50-50 split. It's also about representative teams. If we have an all-white team building facial recognition software, which has happened, it turns out facial recognition software can't recognize a black person's face. Why do you think that is?
Because they didn't think to program it that way?
That's exactly it. And it goes beyond traditional technology. In the automotive industry, it wasn't until 2011 that automotive manufacturers were stipulated by law to have female test dummies. So that means, we're talking not that long ago, not even a decade ago, we were all at the mercy of the standard American male test dummy. So where it would save a man, it would kill a woman. And it wasn't until very recently in the 21st century that we figured that out.
You have written about what you called, quote, a pattern of exclusivity in the tech industry. What's that a reference to?
I think if you look around to C-levels in most major tech companies, most people who get funded, whether they have a fully solidified idea or not, we've created these insular communities where all the people with the money happen to be male and of a certain ethnicity, and they happen to be friends with all the people who look just like them, and they happen to fund the people who just look like them. And what that's created is now this extreme case of over 90% having zero C-level female executives at their company. And it's a little bit astounding, but I think it makes a lot of sense when you look at all the problems that we're having with culture, is because it completely changes the temperature of the conversation when you've invited people of different opinions and different backgrounds to the table.
Do you see that as well?
Yeah, well, for example, in my company, 50-50, but if we look at the leadership team, we are about half and half female male, and almost half is visible minority. So in my previous companies that I started or worked for, it wasn't quite the case. So I definitely see there's a difference in terms of the decisions that we make. Having a very diverse leadership team actually makes a difference. And I believe this is an area that we all have to spend time and make an effort to improve, because it would just improve the company. It would just improve the product.
Okay, Nicole, time and effort to make it happen, but how do you actually make it happen?
I don't believe in affirmative action and saying we need to have 50. We need to stick to that number. There's an opening now. We have to replace it with another woman or someone. So I don't believe in that. It really is a cultural shift. We have to be having these conversations. This kind of stuff's really good. It's healthy. So I think it's a cultural shift. And then we're all business people. We're here to make money. And we need to say that diversity is more profitable. And that needs to be, and that there's
You need to say it only if it's true, though. Is it true?
It is true.
It is true.
There is data that shows that teams, and it's all about that premise I talked about, groupthink. You cannot suffer from groupthink. If you've got a table of people that hang out together, they go out together, they look the same, they act the same, and you've got a problem, and they all think the exact same way, then they end up that solution because they want to get along. They don't want to disrupt the golf game on the weekend or whatever. You need to have healthy argument on teams to really get to the right solution. And I think once we start having that conversation about how diversity is profitable, and there's another couple of topics on diversity too, even age. I'm on a board now where everyone's a lot older than me, and I kind of bring this is what the millennials are doing, and they're your customers. Or like, I think we need to look at age, background. We need to be inclusive of Aboriginals here in Canada, and race, gender, all of that. It's kind of a whole package.
Gotcha. Let me put a new issue on the table here. I suspect you've all heard of David Frum, who used to write speeches for George W. Bush. He's now with the Atlantic magazine, originally, of course, from Toronto. We had him on our program last week talking about his extremely deep concerns about the current administration and whether it was on a kind of road towards authoritarianism. I want to play a little clip from that, and then we'll come back and chat, okay? Sheldon, roll it if you would.
Shortly before the election, about a week before, Twitter canceled a number of accounts belonging to one or another white supremacist. By the way, I don't know if this was a wise thing to do, and I wrote a column at the time criticizing it, but Twitter did it, and it was clearly Twitter's right to do it. It's a private platform. There's no First Amendment claim against Twitter. I spoke to somebody who's very intimately involved with the Trump organization at the time, and they were outraged. And they talked very menacingly about bringing antitrust actions to bear against Twitter should they win the election. After Donald Trump won, he convened a meeting of tech executives. Twitter was pointedly excluded from the meeting, although it was the president's favorite platform. And around that same time, Twitter reinstated all of those accounts. Not only reinstated them, but verified them.
Michael, what do you think of Twitter's decision on all this?
I agree with it. I've faced this before, not with League, but with my prior company at Kobo. We had a situation where a number of books in our UK business, in our UK platform, under the guise of romance and other subcategories that perhaps were pretty docile, were filled with child pornography and filled with stuff that was close to the line. And we had the choice of following what Amazon did, which is to do nothing, or we had the choice to shut it down for the benefit of all of our customers until we could figure out a better way to ensure that our customers had the experience that that they were looking for.
Is there a political price to be paid for making that decision?
Yeah, it cost us a ton. It cost us a ton, but we did it because it was the right thing to do. And I think in the long run, our customers appreciated it.
Let's do another example here. Shopify. The CEO, I think, of Shopify signed the letter. They host Breitbart Store. Everybody knows Breitbart. That's Bannon's outfit. He used to be the chairman of Breitbart. People can buy their merchandise through Shopify's digital store. Does that send a mixed message in your view, Alan?
Well, I can't comment on what they do. It's their business, and I'm not in the e-commerce business. But I can say what I would do for my business. We are in the content business with a ton of user-generated content. Every day we have 500,000 chapters uploaded by our users with 2 million monthly writers. So the amount of content that we see is massive. And we have pretty strict content guideline. If it's offensive, if it's racist, no, we kick you out.
So if somebody wanted, let's do an example then that you would be intimately aware of. If somebody on Wattpad, if you were hosting, for example, or somebody wanted to be on Wattpad, and it was clearly a sort of a white nationalist KKK type of alt-right story, piece of fiction.
It's a clear violation of our guideline. It's racist and offensive, and we take it down.
But if you've got millions upon millions of different stories there, are you sure you're going to catch it?
We try our best because of the volume. We can't guarantee we catch them all. But whenever someone reports a story like that, we'll review that, and if it's in violation of our guideline, in this case, a racist story, then of course we'll take it down. I think one thing that we really want to stand for is, of course, we support free speech. I think everybody does, but free speech does not equate to hate speech. Those are two very different. And we, as much as we want to support free speech, it's my property. I do have the rights to set our content guideline. That's if it's in violation, I have all the rights to exclude them from my property.
Well, that's how you handle it. Here's how Facebook handles it. We got time for this? Here's Mark Zuckerberg this past December saying, Facebook is a new kind of platform. It's not a traditional technology company. It's not a traditional media company. We build technology and we feel responsible for how it's used. Should Facebook, in your view, be responsible for the content on its platform, much in the same way a traditional media company is? What's your thought?
I think social media is interesting because there's supposed to be this platform where everybody can come in and have a conversation. There's a case to be made about, why Twitter hasn't banned maybe the Donald Trump account. But
would you urge them to?
There are a lot of way more powerful people than me urging Jack Dorsey to ban it. Yes. Because a very powerful figure is going after just private citizens in a way that they wouldn't have that kind of outreach even with a traditional media platform. So I think the responsibility for Facebook and Twitter is actually more than a traditional media platform.
So if you had a vote, you'd take away real Donald Trump from Donald Trump. That's his Twitter handle, real Donald Trump.
I think it's just the psychological impact of that for him would be quite disastrous.
What would we watch on Saturday Night Live?
Steve, I think the difference here is the nature of these platforms is they tend to be monopolies, right? So Facebook, Amazon, these companies are. So I think when you are in a monopolistic situation, then you start to take on a little bit more responsibility. And I think that is the difference here. It's not like everyone goes on 7 different versions of Twitter. I think that's what's going on here is that. And they're almost like it's the whole world, right? It's not just America. It's values that they have to represent for the whole world.
But censorship in media is one thing. So social media platforms, yes. But when you mention e-commerce, that is not social media. People are not logging into e-commerce platforms to find out what real Donald Trump is saying. It's about enabling something that you stand behind.
So different set of standards for that.
Of course there are.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
But Nordstrom dropped Ivanka.
They did, didn't they? And Donald tweeted about it.
Right.
Excuse me, the president.
Stock went up, actually.
It did. Huh. I want to thank all of you for coming in tonight and helping us out with this. Michael Serbinis, the CEO of League, the co-founder of Kobo. Nicole Verkindt, founder, CEO of OMX. On the other side of the table, Huda Idrees, founder, CEO of .health. Allen Lau, co-founder and CEO, Wattpad. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.